as far as parachutes are concerned, that was interesting to hear all these parachuters. I came close to bailing out twice in the 3,000 or 4,000 hours I flew as a pilot. The first one was in flying school. I was on a night cross country in southeastern Texas, and I was flying towards the Gulf, looking at a light line, and I wound up in the clouds. And I knew I was flying towards the Gulf, and I was lost, so it was either bail out and land on the land, or stay in the airplane and land in the water. So I thought I would, and I started to bail out. But I looked down, and there was a hole in the clouds, and there was a light line. So I got back in and flew home. And the other time, I was flying, there were eight of us. I had the second four ships, and a fellow I didn't care very much about in the squadron was leading the first four ship. And I kept trying to get him to move, instead of flying around just over the land where the Japanese were below us and shooting at us with anti-aircraft guns. I wanted to move over Manila Bay and wait, because we were waiting to be called in to dive bomb where the Americans were attacking, trying to drive the Japanese out of Manila. Well, I had just made a turn and was right under his airplane when I got a hole about this big around in my right wing. And the right wing had a wing tank that was on fire. So now
you saved it.
Thought about
you could have saved
out,
him.
and I looked down, and the Americans at the end of Rizal Avenue, which is a main street in Manila, had 6-inch cannon at one end of the street, and they were firing at the Japanese in the old walled city, who were firing back at them. And I decided that wasn't a very good place to land, so I went on out over Manila Bay, and in the meantime the fire goes out, so I flew home.
But what happened when you flew home?
Well, I landed, instead of landing at the usual about 70 miles an hour, I landed at about 100 with no flaps, and got to the end of the runway and was slowed down enough so I could make a ground loop to the left. I had just enough hydraulic pressure that I could put on my left brake, and I spun around and wound up parked next to some A-20s that were waiting to take off.
A whole squadron was getting ready to take off, right?
Yeah. Of A-20s. Those are twin-engine light bombers.
So those were bigger than what you were flying.
Yeah. And of course, my airplane was out for 2 or 3 days till they got a new wing on it. And when Nan and I went to, I guess it was the first squadron reunion we went to after we got married, we came up to register. It was up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And 2 guys came up to me. One was a crew chief of another, he was another guy, he wasn't my crew chief during the war. Every pilot had his own airplane, had his own crew chief, and had his own armament chief and his own communication chief. And those three guys took care of his airplane. And this guy comes up with the fellow who had been the maintenance officer in the squadron. And the two of them came walking up to me just out of a clear sky. And the sergeant comes over and says, "Lieutenant, I want to thank you." I said, "What the hell for?" He says, "Do you remember you flew my airplane when yours got shot up?" I said, "Yeah." He said, you saved me from this guy. He was going to fire me." I said, "Well," he said, "the guy who," he mentioned the guy who had been his pilot, had gone out on a number of missions and had written the airplane up as needing, in other words, and come back and
So he got scared and came back and blamed the mechanics.
blamed the mechanic, and he said, "You flew my airplane and you came back from a 3-hour mission and I asked you if there was anything wrong and you said not a damn thing." And he said, "You saved my butt." And the man looked at me